Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's Thursday, um, and we really appreciate you joining us here today. Today, as my guest, I'm Raelene Tenno, your condo insider host. With me today, I have with me Ron Tsukamaki with Atlas Insurance Agency, and
Right.
also his other partner, Kevin Crawford, who does the risk management part of Atlas Insurance, right?
Correct.
So we're going to go through for our condo associations. We're going to talk a little bit about the liability in a pandemic world. We've been doing this for almost over a year now, and hopefully we're turning the corner on this whole thing. But there's a lot of things that condos need to understand and prepare, not just because of the pandemic, but other things that's going to affect their condo master insurance policy. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron and to Kevin.
Hi. Thanks, Raelene. Uh, Appreciate the time. As an insurance person, we don't usually get to talk much about our products and stuff. But for the pandemic, it's really affected the insurance industry. And it's brought out a whole lot of changes that insurance companies have provided, and certainly a lot more exclusions in the policies than existed before. So I'm going to start talking today about uh, basically the insurance portions, liability, negligence. I'm going to have uh, uh, Kevin jump in a after that because he's probably got the most good things to say. Because from an insurance product, we don't have a whole lot of really positive news on what the insurance industry has been doing because of the pandemic. So I'm going to start in talking a little bit about liability. And uh, for liability, there's really we think of it as general liability. So next slide, please. And liability is basically you're legally responsible for your actions, and failure to do that, you're going to possibly result in suits. And there's three basic things that we're going to try to cover. One is the general liability policy. That's for injury to third parties. That's somebody walks on your property, they get injured. Another party gets injured while they're on your property. You have exposure to your own employees, and that's usually covered under workers' compensation. And then the last part that people are starting to become very aware of is your exposure under the directors and officers liability policy, in terms of can the directors and officers and board members get sued for their actions or inactions uh, as they may apply. So, with regard to the pandemic, obviously the question is, if I get sued, if somebody comes on my property and if I get sued, uh, what's going to happen? Who's going to respond and stuff? So, next slide, and we can go to general liability. Under the general liability form, what we're seeing are a couple of very marketed uh, exclusions. And you're going to see these on almost all general liability policies. And basically, they're saying we do not cover for certain situations. We don't cover for the first exclusion on the left is for fungi and bacteria, and we don't uh, we don't cover for losses, bodily injury, property damage claims due to fungi or bacteria. And then more recently, they've even expanded it to communicable disease. And this exclusion flat out applies to the pandemic. If someone uh, gets sick on your property, will your liability respond, your general liability policy? And basically, that exclusion is going to keep your general liability policy from responding. It's a fairly new exclusion. Not all carriers have added it yet, but most carriers are filing to include that exclusion. So you're going to see it pretty much exclusively throughout general liability policies for all the companies in Hawaii. Okay, we talked a little bit about uh, liability for your own employees if they get sick. Well, the coverage technically can somewhat be found under the workers' comp policy. But you have to remember, workers' comp policies are really designed for injuries suffered by your employees while on their normal job duties. Is catching, a COVID, is that happening on the job? And that's one of the issues. It's sort of like I caught the flu. A lot of workers' comp people will say, "Hey, we're not covering you for catching the flu. That's something that mainly happens off the job." So you will have to prove, depending upon the carrier and how lenient they want to be, but you somewhat have to prove that you got COVID while at work or were exposed at work. So for your employees, that could be a problem too. Okay, next slide. Under the directors and officers, basically, the directors and officers cover the fiduciary duties of their actions as directors and officers. And as all policies, they have their exclusions too. And basically, the D&O policy says, well, we don't want to include or cover for bodily injuries by employees or third parties. Uh, it was primarily set up because uh, if people walked on your property and got injured, that's a general liability policy. If your employees get injured on it, that's a workers' comp policy. So they put an exclusion in the policy to exclude for bodily injury, employee injuries, and things like that. And we're starting to see that where somebody comes on your property and they sue the officers and directors because they say or claim that they got COVID while they were on your property. So, but the DNO carriers have been fighting that. Now, a lot of these things are still in court, and we're going to start seeing. It takes time to go through court and get the rulings and set precedents, but uh, right now there are several cases in court regarding just exactly this. Can they get recovery under the general liability, or can employees get recovery under workers' comp or D&O? So it's some of this is still law in the making, I guess. But basically, uh, most associations should assume that those exclusions are going to apply, and you will not get coverage. Now, for employees, it's going to be a lot will depend upon uh, the insurance carriers. Certain carriers are allowing that. So it's a case by case basis. But certainly, general liability and directors and officers, they're all pretty much excluding the coverage when if someone contracts COVID while on the premises. So uh, that's basically from the insurance policy or the insurance coverage standpoint. That's where we're going to, take a stand that most carriers are going to exclude coverage, especially under the DNO and general liability. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to give Kevin the most time because this is something that the associations should follow or can do to help prevent those suits from getting out of hand or getting judgments against you. So I'm going to turn it over to our loss control guy, Kevin.
Thanks, Ron. I think Ron did a good job of explaining that there may not be any coverage on your insurance policy for COVID-related claims. Okay, so this is one of those situations in the pandemic where it exposed a lot of things that we didn't know of previously, or things that we may have taken for granted, like having insurance coverage. And I think that, like, again, that surprises a lot of people that there isn't coverage for something that you pay for. And I think a lot of people have that understanding that, hey, I pay for insurance, I'm due some kind of coverage, so help me out here. But it's not always the case. And this leaves an exposure for business owners or associations to really cover up those loose ends and protect themselves legally. And this is in line with all the kind of questions that we've been receiving from our clients throughout the pandemic. At the beginning, it was, what is COVID? How is it spread? And then as tiers started to open up, it became questions of how do I reopen safely? How do I social distance my employees or our customers? Face mask and hand sanitizers and stuff like that. So this is all the kind of questions that we've been receiving throughout the pandemic. And we understand that not all associations, not all buildings are the same size. You get big ones, small ones, and everything in between. So what I've been telling a lot of my clients is that look to see what your responsibilities are. Consider what falls under your responsibility. Is it the association's responsibility to sanitize, clean, and put those things into effect? An example here, the association's best interest is for the community and its members, and stopping the spread of COVID-19 is in the best interest. So when you start to look at those responsibilities, what you're responsible for, I think that'll point you in the direction of where you probably or should be focusing on those type of things. And if you're familiar with risk management, do an assessment of the hazard. What's going to be the likely cause of spread? Who's going to be infected, and who are most at risk? Second, have a plan and put it in writing. Basically, would spell out this is the procedure, and it's going to be followed this way. And then get your input from your staff or your members, because for lack of better words, those are the people that are on the front line. Those are the people that are going to be exposed. Those people probably have a better understanding of the layout of where everything is. And then finally, review your policies, review your previous policies, review your current policies, periodically go back and review those to see if there's something that needs to be updated, or if there's something, say 5 months from now, we're definitely in a different situation than we were 6 months ago. So things need to be updated on a continuous basis. Next slide, please. So Ron had spoke briefly about liability, your legal responsibility. When I discuss or when I talk about liability to our clients, I always bring up negligence. Negligence to me is kind of the dark side of liability. So recently we've seen in the pandemic that there were situations where employers, I should say, were getting sued or were receiving OSHA citations, OSHA related citations, I should say, for those type of issues. And this is something we've seen more in other states and not necessarily in Hawaii. But to me, if it's happened once somewhere else, it can happen again, and it's likely to happen again. So that's why I always bring up negligence. And negligence is basically a legal theory that needs to be proven in order to hold somebody or a business responsible for the damages that were caused by their action. So if you can see on the screen, there are 4 elements of negligence that need to be proven. Need to be proven in order to hold somebody negligent. So duty, breach of duty, cause, and damage. So an association owes the duty of care to its residents. So that's your duty. Breach of duty, if your facility failed to follow guidelines, that would be a breach of duty. And the cause, if the breach of duty caused a resident or somebody to become injured or ill, then that would definitely be proven there. And then also damage, if the injury or illness was a result of the failure to exercise reasonable care. We have had clients that have asked us, so if someone catches COVID on our property, can we be sued? So I like to think of it in a different way. Maybe it's my insurance background. But to rephrase that question is, if I am sued, would I be able to defend myself in court? So you want to be able to demonstrate that you are aware of a hazard and you did whatever you could to mitigate those hazards. Yeah, we're aware that there is COVID out there that's being spread around. So you need to prove to everybody that you did what you possibly could to inform everybody of the situation. And one of the things you can do, it's pretty simple. Just follow the directives from the CDC government guidelines. This is nothing new. This is what we've been told from the beginning. Lately, we've seen that people have been out and about without masks outdoors, which is perfectly fine. But if you take a look around downtown or certain areas, or even when we go into a lot of our clients' places, most people, if not all people, still have their mask on outdoors. And these guidelines are basically the best practice protecting against the spread of COVID-19. And they should also be used as a basis for your reopening status or your continuing operation. So one of the, to me, I guess again, because of my insurance background, one of the things that is probably most important is communication and the importance of communication. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we were kind of all glued to the news, the TV to see what was coming out next, what the next stage was. So that's the importance of communication. It's also a reminder of what is new and what's expected on your property, your business. Because we can be honest, some people are just not going to either care, or people are just not going to take the time to research what they should be doing. It's a way to establish trust, to let everybody in the community know that you're taking this seriously. And when you do communicate, I can guarantee you the moment that you stop communicating is the moment that people are going to be doing whatever they want to do. So if you have a pool and you don't have any signage with regards to safety, with regards to social distancing, I guarantee you people will just start making up their own rules and do whatever they want to do. And finally, it's a way to document, document. It's probably one of the most important things. If something does happen and it does get pushed to a legal status, one of the first things that they're going to ask for is, where's your documentation? Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? So we did have some questions. I know this is been updated since, but we did have some questions with regards to face mask and what qualifies as a face mask. And what I've been telling our customers, our clients, I should say, and what I've been seeing with our clients is that most of them still have face masks in their protocol. You can always be more strict than what the CDC guidelines or what the state guidelines are, but I would never suggest going outside of those or doing whatever you want to do, because you're basically setting yourself for self up for some kind of liability issue in the future. So a lot of our clients, like I said, still require face masks. So if that's what you require, that's what your rules are. That's what your guidelines are. People should be following those. If you do have repeat offenders, I would suggest definitely documenting that. So if something does happen later on, you have the full proof there that you had made notice to them that they should be having their face mask on. And what qualifies as a face mask? Well, tightly woven fabric without holes, vents, valves, and something that covers the wearer's face and mouth.
So when you go back and talk about negligence, so if there's really no action taken essentially on a condo to even, I don't want to say the word protect, but to even make the residents aware that, hey, we have this COVID and now we have to comply with CDC guidelines. We need everybody to do the mask, including employees, to do this. And to me, the biggest thing is the sanitation. Um, Wiping down the frequently used items like your entry doorknobs and your railings, because if it's a walk up, everybody's using the railings. You know, um, I would imagine those would be like examples of negligence. It's like nobody even did anything to comply with CDC.
Right, right. So to me, it's being able to demonstrate that you did what you possibly could to avoid that spreading of the disease, having it documented, and if need to be, contract a cleaning vendor. That's one way of avoiding some sort of liability or having a shared reliability or liability, I should say,
That would be an additional thing. If you're like a one
if you can afford it.
employee, yeah, if you're one, well, because kind of if you're a one employee kind of condo, you're going to need additional help, I would think, to at least kind of wipe things down or make that hand sanitizer available. But still, you kind of need to wipe certain things down like a couple times a day. Um, it doesn't take that much effort to do that, but sometimes you're going to have to hire somebody extra just to maintain
Yeah.
that condition.
Raelene, one of the things on several of our clients that they actually got a committee of unit owners, and they actually formed task forces to on a certain regular basis, go down and wipe all the doorknobs, like you said, entryways, things, railings, even change out the pool equipment or clean them down. Uh, and they did it several times a day, and they did it in house with unit owners who volunteered to help because you know it's expensive to bring in a service to do those kinds of things, and yet they all agreed that it was a, a community situation that they could all pitch in and help, and so they formed committees to go out and uh, you know, I get the 2 o'clock cleanup or whatever, but uh, they formed committees to do that. And but I think that the key thing on negligence, as we were saying, is that it's really we all know that this is a contagious disease that could be very serious to certain people if they contracted it, and uh, the associations have to do uh, the best they can. Obviously, you have all different types of associations, sizes, wealthiness of members or whatever. But the association as a group need to show that they are doing what I guess a reasonable person, but trying to take positive steps to prevent it.
Okay, and I always hear this word, not just in insurance, I hear it in other professions, where they talk about the word exclusion. So I kind of want to make sure everybody understands what the word exclusion is, which is where they're not going to cover. Right? Am I understanding it correctly? So they're going to not cover for certain things anymore.
Yeah, insurance policies, general liability policies, they basically say we're going to insure for your legal liability as respects like bodily injury claims. Now, do they want to insure everything? And the fact is they can't, or the policy would just be unbelievably costly. So they put in exclusions on things that they believe they cannot economically or whatever insure. So they, under property policy, they say we insure all risks except those that are excluded. And then they put in exclusions, things like wear and tear. We don't want to be repainting your building every 5 years. That's not an insurance issue. So they put in exclusions for items that they do not feel that they should insure or can insure within reason. And so
Okay.
that's where you have the communicable disease exclusion. That's really, it started with SARS, but it's going now in, they're using it for the pandemic.
Oh, so the stars is kind of now it's gotten wider.
Yes.
Because I see more exclusions being added on every year, you know. Um, so the list seems to be getting bigger.
It does, unfortunately, because as society changes, as technology changes, they find out they're subject to a lot more exposure than ever before. And if they hadn't priced for it, or they don't have a way they think they could adequately insure it, they put in an exclusion.
Okay, so we talked a lot about COVID, but what about the other stuff? These there's aging associations, and I know a lot of them are really having to go into converting their piping system from the galvanized to something else.
Mhm.
And I mean, even in my own house, I had I had a leak and it was in between the walls, and I'm like, where is this water coming from? But it was the old galvanized pipe that had a little pinhole.
Mhm.
And I told the contractor, I go, but I remember seeing the puddle of water and I wiped it up and I'm like, where did it come from? And then it didn't leak again. It was just dry. And then it happened again. And he goes, oh, it's probably a rust covered the pinhole. And then something moved that rust and it started up again. So how are you guys, as for condos, when something like that happens, they don't really see it readily. I mean, I just happened to see it because I was renovating that bathroom. Otherwise, I would probably never see it, until
Mhm.
it got really bad where everything was all soaked wet, but with these condos now that are facing having to replace their pipes, but in the meantime, you don't even know right now, like right now, you don't even know if one's already leaking. Little pinhole and it's got the little wisp of water coming out. So, you know, when they start going through the repair process and they discover all this damage that a little pinhole that they discovered from a little pinhole, but yet the damage wasn't visible from the outside. It was really kind of more on the inside. And they start doing that. Is that something that would be um, insurable or,
Well, I'm
kind of a tough question to ask. I put you on the
it
spot.
is because uh, all claims are unique. I mean,
Right.
they just really are, and it depends upon the situation. But I will tell you that 99% of the claims we have are coming because of the aging uh, buildings that we have. Many of the high rise condominiums, or many of the condominiums, were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so you're talking buildings that they're piping now are 50, 60 years old. And we're having a tremendous amount of claims. Uh, the claims technically should be what we call sudden and accidental. If there actually is wording in a policy, if something has been running for 10 days or more, and uh, then that's not sudden and accidental. So it's more of a maintenance or a wear and tear loss. So a lot of those claims might not be covered. But we work very hard. Yeah, you, yeah, when you discover that leak that finally is seeped through the plasterboard wall because of a little pinhole leak between the walls, uh, we certainly push to get it covered. But remember, when the insurance companies start paying all these claims, they also want to get their money back. And so we're seeing significant levels of deductibles that we haven't experienced before. And it isn't unusual to see an association with a $25,000 deductible. We have some that even have greater deductibles.
Wow.
And that's to eliminate those little ones uh, and those little losses because, uh, but what we are working with many of our clients is that they need to be a little more proactive
Okay.
because do regular inspections. You know, for buildings that are 50 years old, you might want to have people come in and do scoping of your pipes and stuff because you want to catch those before you really have losses because the insurance premiums, they're going to make their money back eventually.
Okay.
Insurance company.
So we're at the end. We're running out of time. We're kind of already out of time, but
Sorry.
Ron and Kevin, I really want to thank you for joining me on this Condo Insider. And I look forward to another segment where we can do more about insurance because I think this is a really important topic for especially like you said, all of our buildings are aging. So what are we going to do to protect ourselves from claims? Because like you said, the deductible levels are only getting larger, so it's got to make sense if you're going to make a claim, you know. But in the meantime, how do you protect yourself? And I think that's a really big topic that we all have to be aware and try to figure out how we're going to protect the condo association from those claims, especially when your deductible is this big. So thank you for joining me today. And with that, I want to thank everybody that has joined us today on this Condo Insider via Zoom. And we look forward to seeing you again next Thursday, and will be another segment of Condo Insider. So thank you. Have a good evening. And thank you again, Ron and Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Raelene.
Thank you.